If you have listened to this show at all over the last couple of years when we've been talking and covering the NFL, on Mondays, I'm usually consistent starting off the show with my 10 takeaways of the week segment. But after some feedback from you guys want me to talk about every team and every game, and I totally understand it. Part of what makes the NFL so good is the ability to talk and have an opinion about every game that's going on. And that's what I'm going to be doing today. Take a couple minutes and give you guys my feedback from all around the league, all 16 games after a crazy schedule in week 4. So many things to talk about, so many things to get into, starting off today's episode of the Zach Curl Sports Podcast. And it's time to go around the league and recap each and every one of the 16 games that went on during week number 4. A great week 4, to say the least. So without further ado, boys, hit the music. Let's recap week 4 of the NFL. Game number 1, Thursday Night Football. Bengals 24, Jaguars 21. The Jaguars actually got off to a good start in this game. They went into this game as the desperate team at 0-3. However, I will say, even though they were up 14-0 and Trevor Lawrence for the first time so far this season actually looked pretty good, he was making some nice throws. The Jaguars are just a team that right now you really cannot trust. And even the people that were already skeptical of Urban Meyer when he was brought in as the head coach of the Jaguars couldn't have even expected it to be this badly, this quickly. Michael Silver dropped a report on Twitter earlier this morning saying that Urban is likely to be a one-and-done, has already lost control of the locker room, and given his history, I just don't expect Urban Meyer to be a good head coach. I think he is being wasted in the NFL. He belongs in college. I don't really think him getting caught with the women next to him at the bar is the biggest deal. I don't really care about how good of a husband he is. And if your team was 0-4, you would be wanting to get drunk pretty often as well. I just don't think Urban Meyer is cut to be an NFL head coach at this level. He belongs in college, and props to Joe Burrow. I think he belongs to be in the conversation with guys like Herbert and Mahomes and Jackson and Josh Allen in terms of who is the best young quarterback in the NFL. He is a playmaker. Watch out for Joe Burrow. He is good enough to win the Bengals games by himself. And by the way, the Bengals are 3-1. Just watch out. Let's go to the 1 o'clock games. Jets 27, Titans 24. Props to Zach Wilson and the Jets. I totally understand that the Titans defense is not good, and they were missing Julio Jones and A.J. Brown in this game. However, the Jets offense, even though they were facing 3 really good defenses throughout the first 3 games of the season, the Jets offense really came to play. And that's all I wanted to see from the Jets in this game. You had a much better matchup against Tennessee at home in a much more winnable game compared to the first 3 weeks of the season, and the Jets showed up. They played competitive football. Zach Wilson was out here dropping a couple dimes to Corey Davis, Keelan Cole, Jamison Crowder being back is a big help. And it's a bad loss for Tennessee, I get it. But the Jets, a team that has really struggled throughout the last couple of years trying to establish a new culture with Robert Saleh. Maybe they've just found themselves a quarterback. I like how their defense was able to get to Ryan Tannehill in this game, force pressure. Derrick Henry still went for 150 yards, but they did enough to win this game in overtime. I think the AFC South is the worst division in football. We'll get to the Colts in a little bit. I don't think you should count them out just yet. Good win for the Jets. Moving on, Philly, they lose to Kansas City at home, 30-42. Kansas City wins. That's the final score. And look, Kansas City's defense still cannot stop anyone. It's a concern going forward. And we'll see if they could do anything on the defensive side of the ball on Sunday Night Football against the Buffalo Bills coming up. However, there is just a certain winning factor that comes to Kansas City. All they do is win games. They find a way to win, especially when they're not turning the ball over. And I totally understand. During the games against Baltimore and against the Chargers, they lost. But I think what lost in those games was just the brutal turnover at the worst time. They avoided that on Sunday and really dominated the Eagles. Right now, I still think Kansas City is the best team in the AFC as long as Mahomes, Kelsey, and Hill are healthy and Andy Reid is the head coach Tyreek went off in this game. Those guys are just that hard to stop. Dallas 36, Carolina 28. We're going to get into this game fully in a later segment of today's show, but I was just so impressed with the physicality the Dallas Cowboys showed. Trevon Diggs, Micah Parsons, these guys are looking like blue chip players, and if you want to improve as quick as possible, the best way to do it is through the draft and hitting home runs. I still don't believe in Mike McCarthy, but the natural talent that this Cowboy team has, it may not even matter that Mike McCarthy's a bad coach and doesn't know how to manage the clock. Kellen Moore knows what he's doing in terms of a play caller. I like how Dallas looked at Carolina in this game and said, these guys don't have Christian McCaffrey. This is a game that we still have to win, and that's exactly what they did. Dallas looks like one of the best teams in the NFC and a team that might be poised for a big run. We're going to get into them more specifically and deeper later in today's show. The next game, the Giants earned their first win of the season to go to 1-3 in overtime in New Orleans. And with the Giants, it's funny because I roasted them on this show last week after they lost to the Atlanta Falcons. Their fans were out here booing John Mara on Eli Manning Day when they were honoring their Hall of Fame quarterback. And the reason why the start of the Giants season has been so frustrating is because they've been consistently playing good enough football to lose, right? They should have won that game against Washington. They were winning throughout. And the crazy thing is, going into the season, one of the biggest keys for the Giants was Daniel Jones and how well he'd be. Throughout the first 3 games, he didn't play that badly. The Giants still were just finding ways to shoot themselves in the foot and give them no legitimate chance to win football games. They couldn't step on the gas and close games out. And in this game, the opposite happened. The Giants faced a deficit. If you're the Saints, this is a game you have to win. I'm not too high on them right now. The fact that they beat New England on the road, that was a nice win going on the road, beating a Belichick-coached team. But at the same time, I just don't think New England is very good. The Saints just happen to be the better team that day. And you can't blow this lead at home to the Giants. I think this could be a transition year for New Orleans. I don't know what Sean Payton was doing, throwing the ball with Taysom Hill. That ultimately could have been what cost the Saints that interception. And I just think that the New York Giants found a way to win, and they deserve credit. They go to Dallas this week. If they have any chance to salvage their season, that is a game the New York Giants have to have. But a good job by Big Blue, and really both New York teams finding a way to win in overtime this week. The Browns 14, the Vikings 7. I'll say this. It was a boring game. I totally understand that. Especially in a game between these two offenses, you definitely would have thought more points would have been scored. However, Cleveland's defense is the real deal. That was one of the better games they played in a while. And I think the familiarity of game planning for Kirk Cousins, a guy who Kevin Stefanski had coached as the offensive coordinator in Minnesota before he got to Cleveland, that obviously helped. But look, the Browns defense over the past year plus, they've always had the names, right? Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward. But this year, they have much more depth. They're getting healthier with guys like Greedy Williams and Grant Delpit. They also bring in Troy Hill and Jim Johnson from the Rams. The Browns defense is one of the more improved units in the league. Here's the issue. Baker Mayfield was not good in this game. And I think 1-53, Cleveland has one of the most talented and complete rosters in the NFL. Their offensive line is legitimately good. They can run the ball. Their defense is good. However, I just worry about their quarterback. And Baker Mayfield isn't bad. He doesn't screw up games. But with this surrounding class in Cleveland around you, it shouldn't be that hard for you not to screw up games. And I just think Cleveland, if they want to win a Super Bowl, which with this roster is possible, they're going to need their quarterback to be a little bit more of a playmaker. And in this game against Minnesota, a Vikings defense who is very hit or miss, I get it. But Seattle was able to put up points against them in the first half. Cleveland won this game because of their defense. They deserve credit for that. I just think if their quarterback doesn't play well or better soon enough, there's just an obvious ceiling on this Brown team. And the Vikings, that's a bad offensive performance at home in the Dome. Dalvin Cook was playing. You have to do better. Vikings fall to 1-3. I'm concerned about them. You just never really know what you're going to get from them. And it's a shame because they easily could be 3-1. I think Mike Zimmer could be on the hot seat by the end of this season, and time will tell there. Next 1 o'clock game, Chicago 24, Detroit 14. Look, the Lions deserve credit for how hard they've played, at least to start off this season. They were competitive with Green Bay in the first half. Should have beaten the Ravens if Tucker doesn't make that crazy 66-yard field goal. And then in week 1 against San Francisco, they were getting beaten pretty good early, but found a way to come back and at least make that game competitive in the end. I expected the Bears to win this one. Justin Fields was not as bad as he played in that Week 3 game against Cleveland. That was an embarrassing effort from the Bears and Matt Nagy. And it's frustrating because the Bears defense actually impressed me in the beginning of that game. They were making plays. They were frustrating Baker Mayfield. The game plan for Matt Nagy, though, was that bad that Chicago, especially on the offensive side of the ball, didn't have a shot. But in this game against Detroit, Justin Fields looked legit. He made a couple really nice throws, and the game plan was much better. Chicago's offensive line is less than ideal. I totally understand that. And when you put Jason Peters on Myles Garrett one-on-one, that's usually not going to work out for you if you're a fan of the Bears. But in this game against Detroit, a much softer defense, they made Justin Fields in a position to make all of the easy throws that he possibly can, and I think he showed up in this game. It's going to take time, but this kid has all the physical tools. He has a big arm. He's fast. You hope David Montgomery's okay. He's one of the more underrated running backs in the NFL. Shout out to the Bears, 24-14. The Lions are just in the transition year with Jared Goff. I don't think we could expect anything from them anytime soon. Football purgatory in Detroit. Speaking of football purgatory, the Bills 40, Texans 0. I mean, the Texans, they were competitive to start this season in their first couple games, winning week 1 against Jacksonville, but this game wasn't even close. And finally, all of a sudden, the Buffalo Bills look like they might just be the team we all expected them to be in the preseason. I totally understand they still have a lot to prove, and I could never truly take them seriously as the team to beat in the AFC until they could slay the dragon of the Kansas City Chiefs. But if you're a fan of the Buffalo Bills, here's the good news. You're going to have a huge opportunity this week on the road, Sunday Night Football, Bills at Chiefs. That is going to be a big game, and the winner might just be considered the favorite in the AFC. But Buffalo left nothing on the table here. They beat Houston 40-0. Buffalo's defense has been one of the more surprising stories of the season. Last year, they were below average, and Buffalo was having to win games on the back of their quarterback, and they didn't have a running game either. That's one consistent thing about this year. They haven't been running the ball great, but their defense is playing great as well, and the Buffalo Bills could be a team that if their defense could just make 1 or 2 stops, frustrate Kansas City, based on the way the Chiefs' defense has been playing as of late, I don't think Buffalo's ever going to have a better chance to beat Kansas City than this week. They have to take advantage of it. Good job avoiding the letdown in this spot against the Houston Texan team that is far, far away. I feel for Davis Mills. He's just not ready to play in an NFL game right now. Indianapolis 27, Miami 17. And look, I totally understand Tua Tagovailoa still has a lot to prove as an NFL pro. Who knows at this point if he even is going to be the future of the Miami Dolphins at quarterback, with the Deshaun Watson rumors already starting to swirl. But Jacoby Brissett couldn't get the job done in this game against his former team. He made a couple mistakes when Miami had opportunities to get back in this game. Miami was leading to start, and the Dolphins have been one of the more disappointing teams in the NFL so far this season, starting with that Week 2 beatdown they took on the hands of the Buffalo Bills. And let's be honest, Miami's lucky to be 1-3. If Damian Harris doesn't fumble that football in Week 1 against the New England Patriots, they easily could have been 0-4 after this loss to the Colts. And look, I'm not calling the Colts for dead. Frank Reich, Carson Wentz, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, that defense, they could win a bad AFC South. They can. Tennessee just lost to the Jets. That is a team and a division where anything can happen. Indianapolis certainly has their flaws. I get it. It's hard to trust their starting quarterback to stay healthy, but he did enough in this game to give the Colts the win in a spot they needed it. Going from 1-3 compared to 0-4 in this AFC South would have been tough, even with Tennessee losing. Indianapolis catches a game of ground on Tennessee. That's big for them. Washington, in the final 1 o'clock game we'll go over, beats Atlanta by a final score of 34-30. Good win for Washington. There were plenty of times throughout this game, including on that BS Chase Young, very soft roughing the passer call, where I was wondering to myself, what are we doing here? Is this Washington team just unlucky, and are they just going to go 6-12 this year, or 6-11, and not really have much to play for? I like Taylor Heineke, and he never dies, and he somehow, some way found a way to put Washington on his back and win them this game against the Atlanta Falcons. Matt Ryan was fine in this game. Washington's defense, which a lot of people expected to be really good going into this season, has a lot to prove still. They are not playing good football right now, and they have to be better if they want any chance to win the NFC East. And it's a shame because their quarterback, I think, isn't terrible. You could win games with a good defense in Heineke, but giving up 30 points, I get it's in a dome. I get the Falcons' offense is still decent. It's a good win, but Washington is a team that even with a record of 2-2 in an NFC East that isn't great, they're going to have to show me more if they want to be taken seriously. 4 o'clock game, Seattle 28, San Francisco 21. I think there is something a little bit off about Kyle Shanahan and this San Francisco 49er team. Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't great in the first half. He gets hurt. Trey Lance comes in. He wasn't great as well. I'll be curious to see what he looks like next week in Arizona, assuming he starts, with a full game plan and a full week being used to build that game plan around him. But Seattle just made all the plays in this game when they needed to. They've been a team that so far this season has started off pretty slow, but Russell Wilson balled out. Shane Waldron, their new offensive coordinator, I think is a big improvement over Brian Schottenheimer and their prior offensive scheme. It's a much more modern offense. And Russell Wilson in September, there were a few better. Huge Thursday night game in the NFC West coming up this week with the Rams and the Seahawks. Speaking of the Rams, this is another game we're going to get into a little bit later in the show. Arizona beats the Rams 37-20. And I was just so impressed with, from the start to the finish of this game, Arizona just kicked the Rams' ass. They punched them in the mouth, and the Rams weren't able to fight back. And it was impressive because the Rams in Week 3, they beat up Tampa Bay good. I think there were very few teams in the NFL that could have went into SoFi Stadium in Week 3 and beat the Rams. The intensity for them in that game was just off the charts, facing the defending Super Bowl champion Buccaneers. But ultimately, it was a little bit of a letdown in Week 4, and Arizona took advantage of the Rams not really looking good to start off this game, and Kyler was just slinging the ball all over the field. He was making all of the throws, and the Cardinals right now, based on how they've played in the first 4 weeks, should be in the conversation of the best team in the NFL. I really didn't expect this to happen. I'm not going to lie. This was just an ass-kicking. And Arizona, they struggled with Jacksonville in Week 3. They easily could have lost to the Minnesota Vikings in Week 2. And for them to not only win this game, but to just dominate it from start to finish, that's a great sign if you're a Cardinal fan going forward. If you've listened to me on this show, you will know that I've had my doubts about Cliff Kingsbury as an NFL head coach, but he really had his team ready to play in this one against the Rams. We're going to get into this one later in today's show. Another 4 o'clock game, Packers 27, Steelers 17. It's clear Ben Roethlisberger's just done. And the Steelers really have no one to blame but themselves, because it was clear to me last year, even though when this team started 11-0, Ben Roethlisberger wasn't the primary reason why. And he just looked shot. And he would just do many things throughout a game that would really make you question yourself. Like, what are we doing here? Is this good enough to be a starting quarterback for a winning team? Nonetheless, a team that isn't winning games right now? Like, is Ben Roethlisberger one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL? I think the answer is a clear no. The Steelers' defense is good, and I understand the refs didn't help them at all in this game, but they never really had a chance because the Packers were the better team, the more dynamic offense that could just make all of the plays. And Aaron Rodgers, all of a sudden, after that brutal Week 1 game, starting off 0-1, blowed out by the Saints, the Packers have been looking good, winning 3 games in a row. That Sunday night game against San Francisco, the fact they were able to close that out, maybe the Packers are a team that after everyone gave up on them during Week 1, we saw what happened last year, and we saw that Matt LaFleur, over the last 2 years, has been able to win regular season games. The Packers are definitely a team to watch. I think in the NFC right now, you have the Cardinals, the Rams, the Packers, the Cowboys, the Bucks. Those 5 teams are the class of the NFC right now, and we'll see if throughout the season anyone will be able to change or switch places on that hierarchy. But the NFC is a little top-heavy right now. Good win by Green Bay in a league where a lot of people wrote them off and are going to jump to Arizona on their bandwagon, jump to the Rams on their bandwagon. Green Bay's defense has been impressive the last 2 weeks, and that was a unit I was super skeptical on going into the season as well. I think we should watch out for the Packers. Final game of the 4 o'clock slate, Baltimore 23, Denver 7. And look, I know Denver was super banged up going into this game. Bradley Chubb, he didn't play. They also lost Teddy Bridgewater, so Drew Lock had to play. But honestly, I didn't think it mattered. The Ravens were just the better team, and this was a big game for Denver. After starting off the season 3-0, there were a lot of people getting on their bandwagon, but the 3 teams they played started off the season with a combined record of 0-9, and Baltimore barely beat Detroit on a Justin Tucker 66-yard field goal. But the Ravens, they came to play in this one. Regarding the whole Fangio-Harbaugh thing at the end, basically my opinion is if you have a problem with Baltimore running a play there to try to get to 100 yards, you should have just stopped them throughout the game. It's an impressive feat by the Ravens, always rushing for 100 yards. We knew they did something similar in terms of crazy streaks in the preseason, winning how many preseason games in a row was it? 16, 17. The Ravens are one of the best organizations in the NFL. They are a consistent winner. And Denver, even though I like Teddy Bridgewater, he's played all right throughout his first couple games as a Bronco. I think having that limitation at the quarterback position in a game like this where you were a little bit shorthanded and you just needed your quarterback to just flat out go out there and make plays, that's why I'm a little bit concerned about Denver going forward. They are 3-1. Their schedule isn't terrible going forward, but they were just outclassed in this game. It never really felt close. Sunday Night Football, Buccaneers 19, Patriots 17. Good win from Tom Brady and company going out there to Foxborough in an emotional game, a game that was much closer than many people expected. Look, I don't know what Bill Belichick was doing going for the win, attempting a 55-yard field goal with Nick Folk in the rain on a 4th and 3. It wasn't a 4th and 10. And his kicker wasn't 100%. That just tells me that even though Mac Jones played well, he played all right. Even though Chris Collinsworth was making it look like he was playing like Patrick Mahomes, he played all right. He completed however many it was, 19 consecutive passes. But Bill Belichick, on the biggest play, on the biggest moment of the game, couldn't trust his quarterback. And I'm out on New England. They're not a playoff team in my opinion. Their defense is good, but their offense is just too limited. There's a ceiling on it already. And the Buccaneers, an offense who we expected to go out there and ball out in this game, they were contained, and still Tom Brady did just enough to win. Just because I think on the offensive side of the ball, Tampa Bay, significantly better than New England. The Patriots aren't a team that's built to take advantage of Tampa Bay's mistakes and their banged-up secondary, which I think could be a concern going forward. I think the Buccaneers' defense as a whole needs to play a little bit better, especially against the elite teams. But Tampa Bay finds a way to get the win. Tom Brady in Foxborough, great scene. Then Monday Night Football finally. Chargers 28, Raiders 14. We're going to get into the Los Angeles Chargers a little bit later in the show, talking about the ascendance of Justin Herbert and just how impressive he has been throughout his first year plus in the NFL. The Raiders didn't necessarily come ready to play. You wonder if the weather delay with lightning in the area had anything to do with that. But really, the Chargers looked like the better team. The Raiders had that big run in the second half, and I think the Chargers, what's going to make them a great team is when they finally learn that tough ability to be able to close out games. But they're one of the most talented teams in the NFL, and they could play with many teams in this league going forward between Eckler, Slater, Herbert, Allen, Williams, Bosa, Derwin James. There's so much top-end talent on this Charger team. They deserve credit for playing and getting a victory in a pseudo road game. Even though it was at home, that stadium was a crazy scene being filled with Raiders fans. But that is my rundown around the NFL Week 4. Love the music on this segment of the show. Love going around the league with you guys. That was Week 4 in the NFL.